So oftentimes you'll see an artist sort of move their arm around and not draw anything, and what they're doing is essentially ghosting something in, or they're visualizing where it may go on the paper. So we're going to work on line a little bit today, and I've got a tool or a pencil called Conte. We're going to start off by drawing very light. Now notice how I have my hand. There'll be times when I choke up on a pencil, or I'm sort of at a midway, and there'll be times when I'm drawing, far back. This keeps you from drawing hard, and it helps you to sort of sketch and move a little bit quicker. It also helps you to vary your line. Okay. Start off lightly. Think about your composition. Where do you want things placed? Now, we're drawing organic objects today. And it's a good thing to think about the speed of the curve. So by speed of curve, is it a slow arcing curve? Is it a quicker curve? Or is it a very sharp curve? Stop and think about this. What is the curve? What is the speed of it? Again, I'm drawing a lot from my shoulder. If I draw lightly and I make an error in judgment, placement, or of a speed of a curve or anything else, it's very easy to wipe it out or erase it. Or a lot of artists will just sort of let it live in the background, and they don't mind the viewer seeing the progress of the drawing or the mistakes or the beginning layout of it. Now I'm going to go ahead and lay in a little bit of the plane in the background just so I understand where that is. And notice how I draw through. So there's a connection between this point and then where it comes out. Oftentimes students will put it here and then lower here. So draw all the way through. Now when I say draw all the way through, notice I'm making a mark, then I pick the pencil up and I just sort of follow it and I put it back down. Notice where the high point of your curve is. For me, the high point is a little bit down here. And again, I'll draw right through the stem just to make sure there's a connection between this and the other side. And even on something like this gourd, there's times when I might kind of draw through and make sure there's sort of a connection between the two. So I feel fairly comfortable with what I've laid in. I'm not trying to copy it precisely, but merely use it as reference. I will bring this up a little bit. So now I'm ready to lay down some darker, more permanent lines as I sort of sketch in. And I will continue to kind of sketch in an essence of these ridges, these lines. And I'm very conscious of the negative space or the distance between these. And again, I'm not quite confident in where they are, so I'll just sort of lightly sketch it in so that if I need to, I can move one of those lines. I'm not trying to copy every single line. There's a time and a place for that. There's some people that enjoy that, and others not as much. I enjoy both. But just because your setup presents a certain situation doesn't mean that you have to copy everything. So you'll notice that I started with a much more basic shape here. And particularly in organic things, you'll want to break that basic line or basic shape up and look for these smaller undulations of lines moving in and out and over. So I see this little sort of a bump here, and I'll choose to maybe exaggerate it a little bit. And it kind of comes in through here. The same thing here, this started as one thing, but now there's begins to get segmented up into these little differences, these little undulations within the curve, these sort of separations in the form, or we could say, subforms of the whole. So as I move on, I begin to get more and more confident in the layout, where everything is. There's a little blemish on this piece of fruit here, or excuse me, pumpkin or gourd. And I'll kind of lay that in. So at this point, I feel confident enough. You'll start to notice I choke up on my pencil some, and I'll move in and out like this. Think of it as a tool and as an extension that can be moved the way you need it to. And I'll begin adding more detail, drawing a little bit darker. See how I just did that? I see this is a much bolder, broader line. And now I need a tighter, softer, gentler line back here. Now notice as well, you just saw me pull, essentially we'll say a pivot. And to do that, I literally put my knuckle on the paper like this, let it rest, left my pencil where it is, and just pivoted. So again, use your whole hand. Build a line up, work it up. There's nothing wrong with going over it several times to achieve what you need. So notice how I keep shifting or varying my mark making. I'm always and constantly thinking, what is it that I'm drawing? What is the surface? What would that surface feel like if I were going to, close my eyes and, run my hand across it, or, feel that surface? That's something that's very important. In fact, I would say, if you're watching this course, that'd be a good exercise for you to do before you draw something, is to stop and feel the form of it and think, is it rough, is it soft, is it smooth? And that will alter the line that you're making when you're thinking about that, and you'll make a much better line. So again, you will constantly see me, revisiting a line, working it, building it up. Things take time. They take patience. Decide where you want a sharp line versus a soft line. Strong line versus a weak line. Now I'm starting to try to find, again, like I said before, these little undulations. We started with just a nice round, almost, ball or spherical form, and I'm slowly finding these little divots, little nuances. Again, notice how I'm putting my hand on the paper and I'm using it to brace, and I'm using it to make my mark. Not everything needs to be connected. Don't be afraid to have a broken line. We don't need to show every bit of detail. Pick and choose what's important to you, what's important to the drawing. What are you trying to illustrate or narrate to the viewer? What do you want to show them? Now, I'm pushing much harder down through here. This is a round object. This is the closest surface to me. As it goes around, it goes away. So, to show that that's closer, I'll make sure that through this part, through sort of the center, that's sort of circumference, I'll make sure that that has typically a thicker, bolder line. And again, I'm trying to find those subtle nuances of how this pumpkin is formed. How it has grown. These little interesting things that nature gives us here. I'll pick up a little bit of the texture here and there. I don't want to overdo it, but it's nice sometimes to add that. It's not necessary, but that's something that I want to illustrate. I want to sort of maybe exaggerate that in my drawing a little bit. Now it gets tighter through here. Shift how I'm holding my pencil. And think, where is this line or this form or subform, where is it going? What direction is it going? This is undulating down and into and under and sitting on a table. It's also undulating out and then sort of back in and out and back in. We merely can't copy what we see. We have to think about all these things at once to obtain a better drawing. The pursuit of an artist. What are you capturing? There's a lot of texture up here. I'll make a mark. to me that represents that texture. And before I take this too much further, I'm going to come back into it, but I'm going to get over here and start working on this area of the drawing. I don't want to build up one area of the drawing and ignore the other part and then go to it. This is not the time and place for that. There are situations where that should be done, but in my opinion, we need to build this up as a whole. There's also a time when a line can be drawn fast and you'll get more out of it. And there's a time when you can draw it slow, get more out of it. Notice how I just let the pencil push hard and then I'll let it taper off. My eye is in front of the pencil, meaning if my eye does this with the pencil, your hand will follow. So this is where gesture drawing comes in handy. See how I just did that? I'm essentially using things that we learned in our gesture section on this line drawing. Now, I'm going to get pretty soft with this gourd. This gourd is further back than our pumpkin, and that's why I'm going to do that. You could reverse it, and that would be fine, and that would make your eye focus a little bit more on that. It might be slightly confusing to the viewer, possibly. So you may notice that I'm choosing to accentuate the curve, or as some of us like to say, the S-curve of this gourd in the background. In reality, it's straighter. For me, the artist, I think that it's a little bit boring and doesn't quite work in the context of what's going on. So I am choosing to deliberately make a greater curve, accentuating the roundness of it. And that's something that you can play around with and that you should as an artist. Some of these things that I'm doing have to do with eye-hand coordination and also what's called hand control. And if you're struggling, part of it could be eye-hand control. And the only way to solve that is to draw more and more and more and more. Think of a toddler walking, how wobbly they are, how they fall down. It's the same thing when someone hasn't used their hand quite this way, is they could be clunky or choppy, and they could get frustrated with their results. It takes time, it takes patience, and it takes practice, 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 practice. And there's an interesting blemish. I'll kind of hint at that. There's sort of a relationship here between the two. I want to keep this fairly soft back here. And I think I'll even begin to sort of throw in just lightly this front plane of the table. Now I'm trying to mirror, keeping the line parallel to the back. See how I'm holding my pencil, and I'll just lay it in softly. I don't want this to be the focal point, of course, and I may even lay in a little bit of this bottom edge here. Now this drawing is for demonstration purposes or learning purposes, so I'm doing it as a professional artist, but I wouldn't consider it a professional drawing, meaning it's not for a client. And I could again spend hour after hour on this, and some of that depends on the personality, and you know, there are artists that would like to come in and, you know, draw every little detail of every little wood grain, you know, along here, and we could literally spend hours and hours, you know, doing this. And I think that's great. And some of that depends on the personality of the artist. There's those that really enjoy and love detail, and there's others that are very satisfied with a much more minimalist drawing, you know, merely suggesting some of these things. And a lot of that boils down to personality, personal preference, you know, what the artist is, you know, getting out of this. But I would encourage you, whatever your preference is, at times while you're learning, to get out of your comfort zone. Meaning, if you're not comfortable with detail, try to take some time to do a drawing that is much more detailed than you would normally do. There is a lot you can learn from it, and vice versa. If you're an artist that really enjoys so much detail that you almost can't stop, you know, working on something or spending time on it, get out of your comfort zone and do some drawings with much less detail. You will learn something every time you push yourself out of your comfort zone. So I'm going to continue working on this a little bit more, but we're getting to a place where I'll be satisfied with this as a solid demonstration. Again, I'm constantly going back and working. I'm going to try to build this whole thing up. And again, I can't stress enough how I'm constantly thinking, you know, undulation, turning, curvature. You know, what would this feel like, you know, if I were to touch it? You know, what kind of surface is this? How can I describe that surface to the viewer? You know, and what is it that I'm trying to tell the viewer? You know, is it old? Is it withered? Is it coarse? You know, is it smooth? Constantly thinking. And I enjoy these little dots of sort of texture here. I don't want to overdo it. And again, you might be someone that might be interested in spending the time to do it, and that's great. But for our purposes, I just merely want to hint at some of these things. Now, we're doing a line drawing, not a tonal drawing or a shaded drawing, but I will hint with line at a little bit of possibly this shading back here, but I want it to stay as line. I don't want it to turn into shade. I want this to stay as a line drawing. But I can come in and lightly just hint. I just want to hint a little bit of tone through here. So the way I hold my pencil and how hard I press, you know, I press and just let up, press and let up. Just a little bit there. Again, this is in the background, but I want to push the weight of this line to establish that it's on the ground plane. Giving this a little more heft or weight on the bottom, still trying to keep it, as a line. You notice how I'm doing that. I'm merely pressing hard, and I'm literally rolling my pencil and just letting up. And I'm trying to keep any little dot or texture kind of more in this area. I don't want to get too detailed on my outer edge. And again, where can I push my line? Let some air. Right? Break the line here and there. That gives the eye a place to move, a place to rest. And there's some detail here I want to accentuate. So I'm, again, move my hand back. Get in a little bit tighter on the pencil. And you notice I've kind of done that with both stems. So there's sort of a harmony or a relationship. For me, the texture and sort of the coarseness I find interesting as an artist. So I'm going to choose to accentuate that. I'll make that line a little bit tighter, right? And then just let it drift off, right? Just right through here. Sort of right where our focal point is, right in here. And I feel as though this needs to be punched up a little bit. And I'm constantly thinking, this to that, this playing off of that. How does this look compared to that? Understanding that this is behind it, but also understanding that they're working together in harmony or in unity within this picture plane. They're separate things, but yet they're one. A little blemish over here that I like. And sometimes it's a subtle thing that can make a picture. So I'm very subtly coming in, a little bit of line through here. And I'm going to go back and pull this out a little bit more here at the bottom. Again, you see me going over the same lines sometimes. I'm just, again, building them up subtly. I'm working that line. And I think that's a good demonstration of what you can do with line and how to handle a pencil and thinking about texture and thinking about form. So this was fun, and we'll take a look at some more lessons as we move on through the course, and I hope you enjoyed it.